They will tell you to be authentic, to be kind, to lead with an open heart. But look closely at the ruins of history. They are paved with the skulls of good men who followed this advice. Their compassion was not a shield, it was an invitation for the wolves. What is the terrible truth they failed to understand? That in the unforgiving theater of power, your good intentions are not only worthless, they are a liability. The world is a graveyard of noble intentions, a testament to the failure of the well-meaning. It is populated by the spectral figures of leaders who sought to be loved, executives who attempted to manage by consensus, and visionaries who staked their futures on the inherent goodness of mankind. They all operate under a single, fatal delusion, a beautifully crafted lie whispered from generation to generation, that one should treat others as they wish to be treated. This is the cornerstone of their philosophy, and upon it they construct empires of sand. Their foundations are built upon the most volatile materials known to man: gratitude, loyalty, and affection. They fervently believe that a commanding aura, a presence that quiets a room, is an organic extension of a virtuous character. They imagine it as a light that shines from within, a beacon of their own purity that naturally draws others into its orbit. Their entire strategy is one of disclosure, of vulnerability, of believing that to be known is to be respected. They campaign with an open door and an outstretched hand, convinced that their sincerity will be their armor. And for a brief deceptive season, this approach may appear to flourish. People are drawn to this warmth, charmed by an apparent lack of artifice and comforted by a leadership that does not demand but requests. The idealist is praised, admired, even cherished. He becomes a symbol of a better way, a more humane form of authority. But this love, as the great Florentine observer Niccolò Machiavelli knew with chilling certainty, is a treacherous and unreliable ally. It is a bond of obligation held together by the gossamer thread of fleeting sentiment. The idealist, in his desperate courtship of affection, unwittingly makes himself a servant to the very people he imagines he leads. He becomes entirely dependent on their approval, a prisoner chained by the weight of their expectations. His authority is not his own. It is a currency minted by public opinion, a loan granted by the masses that can be revoked at their slightest whim. His aura is therefore a fragile thing, a beautiful, iridescent but hollow sphere easily shattered. The moment fortune, that capricious arbiter of fates, turns against him, when the treasury is bare, when a painful but necessary decision looms, when a rival power emerges on the horizon, the supposed love of the people evaporates like mist in the searing light of day. For men, as Machiavelli diagnosed with surgical precision, are ungrateful, fickle, pretenders, and dissemblers. They will pledge their lives to you so long as you are bestowing benefits upon them, but the instant their own self-interest collides with your needs, they will abandon you without a flicker of hesitation. The idealist, who built his majestic castle on the soft ground of their affection, suddenly finds himself standing on nothing but air. The hand he once extended in friendship is bitten. The open door he prided himself upon becomes a gaping entrance for his sworn enemies. His very nobility becomes the instrument of his own destruction, for he cannot bring himself to perform the necessary cruelties, the pragmatic betrayals that the grim calculus of survival demands. He is paralyzed by his own moral code, rendered predictable in his virtue, and therefore easily ensnared and outmaneuvered by those who are not. His fall is always the most profound tragedy, for he is not destroyed by his vices, but is crucified upon the cross of his own virtues. He learns the final brutal lesson only as the blade is at his throat. The world is not a courtroom where righteousness is rewarded. It is a savage, unforgiving battlefield, and on a battlefield, a shield forged of good intentions is no different than a shield made of glass. It offers the illusion of safety, right before it splinters into 1,000 pieces. Now turn your gaze from the fallen idealist and consider the prince, the true strategist. He begins by incinerating the beautiful maps of the world as it should be. He is interested only in the brutal, jagged topography of the world as it is. His first and most formidable weapon is not a gleaming sword, nor a coffer overflowing with gold, but a cold, relentless, and unflinching observation of human nature. He does not study mankind in the polished salons of society or in the hopeful texts of philosophers. He studies man in the raw, gripped by fear, motivated by greed, and governed by an insatiable hunger for self-preservation. From this cold granite bedrock of reality, he begins the meticulous construction of his dominion. The Machiavellian path to a powerful aura is not one of revelation, but of calculated concealment. It is not about allowing the world to see who you are. It is about forcing the world to see only what is necessary for your purpose. For as Machiavel penned, men in general judge more by the eyes than by the hands. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few touch what you really are. This is the paramount secret, the axiom upon which all enduring power is built. An aura is not an ethereal energy field. It is a deliberate and artful construction. It is a reputation forged in fire, a performance enacted on the grand stage of public perception. The prince understands that real sustainable authority does not lie in virtue itself, but in the strategic appearance of virtue. He must, as a matter of survival, learn how not to be good and to deploy this fearsome knowledge or withhold it, according to the cold dictates of necessity. His aura is not a fragile expression of his internal sentiments. It is a masterful suit of armor, polished to a blinding sheen, reflecting every quality the people wish to see in a leader: mercy, faith, integrity, humanity, piety. It is a perfect, impenetrable facade. But beneath the polished steel of this public image resides a mind unburdened by the shackles of conventional morality, a will free to do what is necessary to preserve the state, to secure his legacy, and to achieve his objective. He does not waste his energies seeking the fickle and unreliable affection of the people. He knows love is a currency with no stable value. Instead, he cultivates something far more durable, far more potent: fear. This is not the brutish fear that breeds seething hatred, for a hated ruler builds his throne over a volcano, always minutes from eruption. No, the prince cultivates a more sophisticated and effective form of fear, a deep, abiding, and almost reverential dread of his power. It is a profound respect born from the unshakable public understanding that he is capable of swift, decisive, and terrifying action. It is the certainty that his kindness is a choice, not a weakness, and that crossing him has consequences that are both absolute and final. This is the unyielding foundation of a true and powerful aura. It is not built on the shifting sands of love, but on the granite of human self-preservation. It is an aura that does not need to beg for obedience. It is an aura that commands it, silently and absolutely. For love is a bond of obligation which men, being wicked creatures, break when it is to their advantage to do so. But fear is maintained by a dread of punishment which never fails. Comment: aura is forged. To accept this immutable truth, and subscribe to learn how to construct the pillars of this commanding reputation. To understand that an aura must be forged is merely the beginning. It is the equivalent of a quarryman realizing that a fortress is not grown, but built. Now you must learn the craft of the architect. You must understand the essential pillars upon which this edifice of perception is raised. These are not principles of morality. They are laws of spiritual physics, immutable and absolute. To ignore them is to build a structure destined for collapse. The prince who masters their application does not merely rule a territory. He commands the very reality of those who gaze upon him, shaping their thoughts and directing their will long before any decree is ever issued. This is the science of creating a reputation that does a prince's bidding for him, a presence that pacifies dissent before it can be spoken and inspires obedience as a natural, reflexive instinct. It is the art of becoming a cause, not just a man. The first and most vital pillar, the very foundation of your fortress of self, is the doctrine of appearances. This is the supreme law, and all other strategies are its servants. The common man, and even the noble, lives in a world of surfaces. He lacks the time, the inclination, and the intelligence to investigate the true nature of things. He judges the tree by its bark, the book by its cover, and the ruler by his public performance. The prince, therefore, must become the master actor, the supreme dramatist on the stage of power. His inner world, his doubts, his fears, his necessary cruelties, his cold calculations, must be a sealed and hidden chamber. His outer self must be a spectacle of virtue. He must cultivate with painstaking diligence the appearance of being merciful, faithful, humane, upright, and, above all, religious. It is not necessary to have all these qualities, but it is absolutely essential to appear to have them. This performance is not an act of deception for deception's sake. It is a strategic necessity. A reputation for mercy prevents the populace from becoming desperate, for desperation is the mother of rebellion. An appearance of fidelity makes your allies trust you, even as you calculate the precise moment their usefulness will expire. A projection of humanity makes your necessary cruelties seem like tragic aberrations, rather than the true expression of your will, thus confusing your enemies and comforting your subjects. And the appearance of piety is the most potent tool of all, for it cloaks your political ambitions in the divine, suggesting that your will is aligned with a higher power, a force against which it is futile and indeed sacrilegious to struggle. The prince treats these virtues not as a moral compass, but as colors on his palette, to be applied to the public canvas as the situation demands. He understands that while it is good to be these things in private when possible, a ruler who is invariably bound by them will invariably be ruined. He must possess a spirit so flexible that he can turn and change direction as the winds of fortune and the necessities of his actions command him. The performance is everything. The second pillar is the duality of the beast, for a reputation of virtue alone is a passive shield. To project power, you must also project a capacity for terrifying force. Man, Machiavelli notes, is a creature that must be dealt with as part of nature. And in nature there are two primary methods of prevailing: law, which is proper to man, and force, which is proper to beasts. Since law is often insufficient, a prince must learn how to use the beast. He must become both the lion and the fox. The lion represents overwhelming, spectacular power. He is the symbol of brute force, the roar that scatters the wolves. The lion in the prince is the capacity for decisive, shocking violence. It is the public execution of a traitor, the swift annihilation of a rival family, the razing of a rebellious city. The aura of the lion instills a primal fear. It reminds all who see it that the prince is not to be trifled with, that his patience has limits and that his wrath is a devastating force of nature. It is this quality that crushes open rebellion and deters overt challenges. But the lion, for all his might, is a simple creature. He cannot see the snares and traps laid for him. For this, the prince must simultaneously be the fox. The fox represents cunning, astuteness, and a mastery of intrigue. The fox never walks into an obvious trap. He recognizes the flattery of a courtier as a baited hook. He understands that a treaty is merely a temporary cessation of hostilities, not a bond of friendship. He can scent a conspiracy before it ever coalesces. The aura of the fox generates a different kind of respect, a respect for the prince's intellect. His subjects and rivals come to believe that he is always 3 steps ahead, that to plot against him is to plot against a mind that has already anticipated and countered their every move. This intellectual fear can be even more potent than the physical fear inspired by the lion. It paralyzes his enemies with doubt and convinces his allies that he is a master strategist worth following. A prince who is only a lion will eventually be trapped. A prince who is only a fox will eventually be torn apart. But the prince who can embody both, who can cloak the lion's strength in the fox's subtlety, who can alternate between them with unnerving unpredictability, becomes an unsolvable problem for his enemies. They never know if their aggression will be met with a roar and a claw, or with a quiet, intricate trap that snaps shut when they least expect it. This duality creates an aura of profound and terrifying competence. The third and final pillar is the most difficult, for it requires the repudiation of all conventional sentiment. It is the mastery of the economy of cruelty. An aura of power is an abstraction until it is proven with a concrete, unforgettable act. It is here that the prince must use cruelty, not as an act of passion or revenge, but as a surgeon uses a scalpel, with precision, with detachment, and only for the health of the state. Machiavelli distinguishes between cruelties well used and ill-used. Ill-used cruelties are those that are small, repeated, and spread out over time. A ruler who engages in this, A minor execution this week, the seizure of a small property the next, does not secure his state. Instead, he breeds a festering, ever-growing hatred. His subjects are never allowed to feel safe. They live in a state of constant anxiety, and this anxiety inevitably curdles into a desire for revenge. This ruler is seen not as strong, but as a weak and sadistic tyrant who enjoys the suffering of his people. Well-used cruelties, however, are those that are committed all at once, at the beginning of a reign or in a moment of supreme crisis, to secure one's power and eliminate all threats. The shock of such an act is tremendous. It is a spectacle of absolute power that cauterizes the wounds of the state in a single, brutal application. Because the cruelty is swift and decisive, and because it is followed immediately by a return to stability and the distribution of benefits, the people are at first stunned into submission, and then, gradually, they forget the severity of the act. The memory of the terror lingers, but it does not fester. It becomes a legendary tale, a warning of the prince's capabilities that maintains order for years to come. Consider a corporate leader who, upon taking over a failing company, fires 10% of the workforce in a single day. The act is brutal, shocking, and universally feared. But it is done. The next day, he lays out a clear new vision and begins rewarding those who remain. The fear from that single act ensures his policies are followed without question, while the subsequent stability earns him a grudging respect. He has used cruelty well. He has established an aura of absolute authority that now allows him to rule with a lighter hand. These three pillars, the constant performance of virtue, the unpredictable duality of the beast, and the surgical application of cruelty, are the iron triangle upon which a truly powerful and enduring aura is constructed. They are the architecture of fear, respect, and unshakable authority. The pillars of power are not self-erecting. They are dead stone until animated by a will of exceptional discipline. Having understood the science of appearances, the necessity of the beast, and the calculus of cruelty, the aspiring prince now confronts the most formidable territory of all, his own soul. For the grand theatre of power is not merely played for an external audience. Its first and most critical performance takes place within the silent amphitheatre of the mind. Before you can command the will of others, you must achieve an absolute and ruthless dominion over your own. This is the great internal war, and its victory is the true coronation, an anointment of the spirit that makes the external crown a mere formality. The first casualty in this war must be your own sentimentality. The prince must learn to surgically excise the parts of himself that yearn for genuine connection, that crave approval, that flinch at the prospect of being feared. He must bifurcate his existence into two distinct entities: the man who may feel pity, affection, and doubt, and the prince, a political instrument, an entity that is pure function and strategic will. The man may recoil at a necessary betrayal, but the prince must execute it with the dispassionate precision of a geometer plotting a line. The man may desire friends, but the prince knows he can only have allies, and that all alliances are temporary, subject to the constant shifting calculus of interest. To achieve this state is not to become a monster, but to achieve a higher form of clarity. It is to look upon the landscape of human affairs not as a participant in its messy dramas, but as a general viewing a map from a high vantage point. The figures on the map are not people with hopes and dreams. They are assets, threats, obstacles, and opportunities. Their morale is a resource. Their loyalty is a condition. Their lives are a currency. This emotional disengagement is the source of the prince's greatest strength. While his rivals are blinded by rage, crippled by personal affection, or swayed by flattery, he remains in a state of cold, diamond-hard perception. He does not mistake the warmth of a handshake for a guarantee of loyalty. He does not confuse the cheers of the crowd with genuine support. He sees through the performance of others because he has become the master of his own. He has conquered the human impulse to believe that the world is as he wishes it to be, and has forced himself to see it only as it is. This is the primary victory. It is the forging of a mind that can withstand the psychological pressures of rule, a mind that does not crack when it must choose between a popular evil and an unpopular good. This inner sovereignty is the engine that animates the entire facade. The aura of power can only be projected with conviction by one who has first vanquished the weaknesses within himself. The public will only believe in the mask if the man wearing it never, ever flinches. With this internal discipline secured, the prince turns his gaze outward, to the manipulation of public perception. Here he confronts the eternal dilemma, the question that has haunted rulers since the dawn of time. Is it better to be loved or to be feared? The idealist, the fool, chooses love. The prince, the realist, understands the profound and practical superiority of fear. Love, Machiavelli explains, is a transaction. It is a bond of obligation based on benefits conferred. The people love a ruler so long as he is generous, so long as he is victorious, so long as he provides for them. But this bond is held by the ruler, who must constantly work to maintain it. He must keep the benefits flowing, keep the victories coming, keep the people satisfied. It is an exhausting, endless effort, and the moment he fails, the moment there is a famine, a lost war, a necessary tax, that bond is broken. The people, being essentially self-interested, will withdraw their affection as swiftly as it was given. Love makes the ruler a debtor to his subjects. Fear, however, operates on a completely different principle. A carefully cultivated fear, a dread of the ruler's power, is a bond held not by the prince but by the people themselves. It is a self-policing mechanism. The subject who fears his ruler's wrath will regulate his own behavior. He will not conspire. He will not openly dissent. He will pay his taxes. The prince does not need to constantly do something to maintain this fear. The memory of his power, the legend of his decisiveness, the lion's roar, does the work for him. It is a far more efficient and therefore more stable foundation for the state. But it is crucial to understand the delicate chemistry of this emotion. The objective is to be feared, but never, under any circumstances, to be hated. Hatred is an active, volatile, and dangerous emotion. Fear is passive and suppressive. Hatred is born when a ruler's actions become predatory and capricious, when he threatens the two things a man will defend to the death, his property and his honor, especially the honor of his women. A prince who seizes the ancestral lands of his subjects, or who indulges his lust with their wives and daughters, transforms their fear into a burning, vengeful rage. At that point, the subjects feel they have nothing left to lose, and a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous enemy of all. The prince must therefore be the embodiment of feared justice, not of hated tyranny. His punishments must be severe, but must always appear to be deserved. He must take life when necessary, but never property without justification. He must be the terrifying but predictable storm, not the random, destructive wildfire. The aura he seeks is one of awe, a state where the people respect him so profoundly that the thought of disobedience becomes an irrational, self-destructive impulse. This carefully calibrated perception is maintained through the unending performance of constructing the facade. Every public appearance, every decree, every rumor allowed to circulate in the court is a brushstroke on the public portrait of the prince. His reputation is his greatest asset, a work of art he must continuously and tirelessly cultivate. Is there a need to appear magnanimous? He can stage a public pardon of a known but minor enemy. Is there a need to reinforce his piety? He can make a conspicuous donation to the church or undertake a solemn pilgrimage. Each action must be a calculated performance designed to reinforce the desired public image. He understands that generosity, for instance, is a dangerous quality if practiced consistently, as it depletes the treasury and creates an expectation of handouts. The wise prince cultivates a reputation for being miserly. This is at first unpopular, but it allows him to finance his wars without burdening his people with excessive taxes, and in the end, he is seen as a better steward of the state. When he does choose to be generous, with the spoils of a conquered enemy, for instance, the act is so unexpected that it is all the more potent and celebrated. His every act is theater. When he must punish, he does so with a visible display of reluctant gravity, as if the execution of justice pains him personally. When he speaks, his words are measured, ambiguous, leaving allies and enemies alike to debate his true intentions, thereby enhancing his aura of intellectual depth. The reputation he builds is both an armor and a weapon. It is an armor that deflects the poison of slander and calumny. If the prince has a long-established reputation for integrity, a rumor of his corruption will find little purchase in the public mind. It is a weapon that can destroy a rival without a single drop of blood being spilled. By subtly encouraging rumors that an opponent is weak or treacherous or impious, the prince can erode his enemy's base of support until he collapses under the weight of his own shattered image. The prince is, in essence, the master storyteller, and the story he tells is about himself. He molds the judgment of the masses not by arguing with them, but by creating a compelling narrative of his own power, justice, and inevitability. He does not leave the perception of his character to chance. He forges it, directs it, and defends it as he would the most vital fortress in his kingdom. You have journeyed into the heart of the shadow world where power is truly forged. You have learned the reality of human nature. You have been given the tools to construct your reputation, and you have mastered the internal discipline required to wield them. Now, before we reveal how this architecture of perception is solidified into a legacy of stone, ensure you are subscribed, for this final wisdom is not for the spectator. It is reserved for those who are willing to act. An aura, no matter how meticulously crafted, is ultimately a promise. It is a specter of capability, a shadow of potential force. It can command respect, instill caution, and manipulate opinion, but it remains an abstraction until it is consecrated in the fire of a decisive, irreversible act. This is the moment where the prince ceases to be a mere performer and becomes the author of reality itself. This is the execution of the masterstroke, the singular event where virtu, that combination of audacity, skill, and strategic genius, seizes upon an opportunity presented by Fortuna, that fickle goddess of chance. For fortune is a raging river that can sweep away the works of men, but a prince with true virtu is the engineer who, in a moment of calm, has already built the dams and canals to redirect the coming flood to his own advantage. He does not wait for the perfect moment. He recognizes the opportune one, the fleeting window in which his enemies are complacent, his allies are aligned, or the people are distracted. This decisive action is not a battle in a conventional war. It is a political thunderclap in a clear sky. It is an act of what Machiavelli terms well-used cruelty, and its brilliance lies in its timing, its speed, and its finality. As he instructs, injuries ought to be done all at one time, so that being tasted less, they offend less. Benefits ought to be given little by little, so that the flavor of them may last longer. The masterstroke is the embodiment of this principle. It is the swift, surgical, and often brutal removal of all threats in a single concentrated instant. It may be the public and spectacular elimination of a nest of conspirators, as Cesare Borgia did with his treacherous captains at Sinigaglia. It might be the sudden imposition of a new, severe set of laws that restructure the very foundations of society. Or it could be a single, shocking example of justice, so terrible and so seemingly righteous that it silences all dissent for a generation. The purpose of this act is not merely to remove obstacles, it is to fundamentally reset the psychological landscape of the state. The shock of the masterstroke is its primary weapon. It stuns the populace into a state of awed submission. It demonstrates, in a way no mere words or posturing ever could, that the prince's reputation for ruthlessness is not a rumor, but a fact. It proves that his power is absolute and that he possesses the will to use it without hesitation. The speed of the act prevents opposition from gathering. Its totality ensures that no one is left to seek revenge. It is a cauterizing blow that burns away the infection of sedition from the body politic. For a brief, terrifying period, the prince becomes a force of nature, an earthquake that levels the old, unstable structures. The key is that this period must be brief. The storm must be violent, but it must pass quickly. It is a singular event of profound trauma, designed to make the peace that follows seem all the more precious and desirable. The prince who masters this understands that sometimes the only path to a lasting peace is through a moment of terrible but controlled violence. He does not commit this act out of anger or malice, but with the cold, detached finality of a headsman swinging his axe. It is the necessary horror that births a new order. The echo of the thunderclap is the sound of opportunity. The true victory is not found in the strike itself, but in the deafening silence that follows. While lesser men would indulge in celebration or paranoia, the true prince immediately begins the work of consolidation. He understands that power abhors a vacuum, and he uses the awe and fear he has just created to lay the foundations of his new state. The real objective was never merely to win, it was to build. This is where he demonstrates that his cruelty was not an end in itself, but a means to a greater stability. He immediately begins the process of distributing benefits, but as Machiavelli advised, he does so slowly, piece by piece. A small tax is repealed, a new public work is commissioned, a popular festival is declared. Each of these acts serves as a balm on the wound of the masterstroke, and because they are savored over time, they slowly transform the public's memory of the prince from that of a terrifying destroyer to that of a stern but benevolent founder. This is the moment he creates the institutions that will perpetuate his power and render it impersonal. He replaces the men he has broken with men he has made, individuals whose loyalty is absolute because their entire fortune and status depend upon him. He establishes new laws and customs that reinforce his authority, weaving his will into the very fabric of daily life until it becomes unquestioned tradition. The fear he once had to actively project now becomes institutionalized. It is embedded in the new legal code, in the authority of his new magistrates, in the structure of his new army. Obedience ceases to be a conscious choice made under duress. It becomes the default setting of the public mind, a reflexive habit. His aura is no longer a personal performance, it has been ossified into the state itself. He has successfully transformed his personal virtue into a durable, lasting order. The goal, ultimately, is to construct a system of power that is so well designed that it runs on its own. A stable and predictable engine that will endure even when he is gone. For the prince, the truest measure of success is not merely seizing the throne, but building one that will outlast him. And so we arrive at the final stark truth about the nature of power. It is not a matter of goodness or wickedness, of morality or sin. These are the luxury concepts of private citizens and cloistered philosophers. For the prince, for the architect of a state, there is only one relevant dichotomy: effectiveness versus failure. Power is the lonely science of human management, the art of imposing order on a world that leans eternally toward chaos. The prince is a physician who must sometimes amputate a limb to save the body, a sculptor who must do violence to a block of marble to reveal the form within. He is judged not by the purity of his intentions, but by the stability of his creation. Did he build a state that endured? Did he provide security and order for his people, even if the price was their freedom to be foolish? Did he have the courage to gaze into the abyss of human nature and not blink, to do what was necessary when weaker men would have faltered? This is the ultimate burden and the ultimate glory of the Machiavellian path. The supreme power is the capacity to see the world as it truly is, in all its brutal and unforgiving clarity, and to possess the unshakable will to act upon that vision. It is the construction of a throne that becomes a monument, a testament not to a man's goodness but to his formidable and everlasting efficacy.